So for the trihybrid cross, we are dealing with two individuals, or parents, which are heterozygous at three different genotypes, such that over here you're gonna deal with three different genes. Uh, so you could have gene A, gene B, and gene C. So if you are heterozygous at gene A, it means the genotype gonna be capital A, small a. And then if you are heterozygous at gene B, it means that the genotype is gonna be capital B, small b. And then for gene C, you're gonna be capital C, small c. So combining all together, you're gonna have capital A, small a, capital B, small b, and capital C, small c. So the cross is between two parents who have this genotype. So this is how it looks like. All right. So, we'll do the same stuff. So you look at the same concepts under trihybrid cross as we did for monohybrid and dihybrid crosses. So the trihybrid cross, this is how the phenotypic ratio looks like. Now, earlier we said that to determine the number of phenotypes, we use the formula 2 to the power n. Remember? 2 to the power n, where we look at the n to be the number of genes in that particular cross. So over here, we trihybrid cross, the n is going to be 3. So 2 to the power 3 is going to give you 8 different phenotypes. So physically, the offsprings are going to be different in 8 ways. So assuming so we're gonna have, as we said earlier, according to Mendelian inheritance, every gene portrays only one trait. So if, for instance, the gene A is portraying, let's say, um, the skin color, or actually, let's use a different trait to be, for instance, the color of the eye. It could be blue or black, considering only two color. So it could be that the capital A is gonna be black, which is dominant. Most people have the color of the eye, and then the small a is gonna be, say, blue, or blue. So in that case, you're gonna have to understand the numbers in the ratio. As we said earlier, the hybrid cross was having 9 to 3 to 3 to 1. By this time, the trihybrid has 27 is to 9, 9, 9 is to 3 is to 3 is to 3 is to 1. So this 27, now you have to listen very carefully. The 27 means that since we are dealing with three different genes at the trihybrid cross, the 27 means that the person or the offspring is going to have three dominant genes. So it's going to have capital A in there, capital B in there, and then the capital C in the genotype. So if you look at the person's genotype, you're gonna have at least one capital A, one capital B, and one capital C. So any genotype that has the following, that has that kind of format, is gonna fall under the 27 ratio, right? 27 ratio. So the 27 means that if you look at this carefully, from the phenotypic ratio, you could calculate the number of progenies within the outcomes, all right, after mating. So 27 plus 9 plus 9 plus 9 plus 3 plus 3 plus 3 plus 1 will give you 64. It means out of trihybrid cross, we expect about 64 people or 64 progenies to be formed. And then out of that 64, 27 are going to have 3 dominant genes. So if you have 3 dominant genes and the total number of genes is 3, right? If you have 3 dominant genes means recessive gene is going to be 0. Okay? Means you have capital A in there, capital B in there, capital C in there. So 3 dominant genes, 0 recessive. And then the 9 represents 2 dominant genes. Right? 9 represents 2 dominant genes. But we said that total number of genes under trihybrid was 3. So if 9 represents 2 dominant genes, it means it's 2 dominant genes and 1 recessive. It makes sense, right? And then the 3 represents all the 3. Okay. Every 9 has a meaning. Okay. The first 9 could be that A and B are dominant and C is recessive. The second line could mean that A and C are dominant and the B is recessive. And then the last one could mean that B and C are dominant and A is recessive. And then the same applies for the tree. The tree means that we have only one dominant gene. Okay, it's that the A is dominant and then the B and the C are recessive. Or the second tree means that the B is dominant and A and C are recessive. And the last three could be that the C is dominant and A and B are recessive. Right, so that is the meaning of the ratio. Then the one means that all of the genes are recessive. So you could have something like small a, small b, small b, small c, small c. That is recessiveness. So this is the meaning of the ratio. So how do you, I've already spoken about the number of different phenotypes. So from the ratio, you could see that the 27 represents one phenotype. The first 9 represent another phenotype. The second one, the third 9, the first 3 in that order. So you could see that in the ratio, you have 8 different phenotypes. And in the formula, we could just use the formula to calculate straight for 2 to the power n, 2 to the power 3, since it's trihybrid, so you're gonna get 8. Then number of different genotypes. We said earlier that you could calculate that by using the formula 3 to the power n. So over here, the trihybrid was gonna have n of 3, so 3 to the power 3, you're gonna have 27. So it means that in this course, we are expecting that about out of the 64 offsprings, they are not going to have the same genotype, right? So you're going to have some having, and then all of them are going to have a different, some will have same, all right? But then most, you can see that you could have about 27 different genotypes among all the 64 individuals. So some are going to have the same phenotype, but then in actual this thing, we are going to have differences in those genotypes. So if you refer to the previous video where we looked at the monohybrid cross, you see that these things appear there. Then number of total progenies, that is the total population. So as I said earlier, total population is calculated by 4 to the power n. So 4 to the power 3 in this case is going to be 64. Or you could equally add the numbers in the ratio, the phenotypic ratio, then get 64. Okay. So this is a sample question. Let's go through quickly. In self-in-a-rice plant, which is heterozygote, has 3 gene loci for gene A, B, and C. Find the probability that the progeny will have A, all dominant genes, B, 2 dominant genes only, C, 1 recessive gene only, D, all recessive genes, E, no recessive gene, and then F, at least 2 dominant genes. Now you have to understand this and then use the phenotypic ratio to carefully calculate. Now, let's look at the solutions. So to calculate the probability of having a progeny having all dominant genes, we're going to use the 27 in the ratio. So we said earlier that in this ratio, 27 represents all dominant genes, right? So if you're having all dominant genes as the progeny, then you're going to have 27 out of total population, which is 64. So that is why over here you have 27 over 64 to be the answer. Then the B, probability that the progeny is going to have 2 dominant genes only. 2 dominant genes only. So let's go back to the ratio. So 2 dominant genes, I told you that all the 9 in the ratio represent 2 dominant genes. Now the question was too open. They didn't tell us whether the person is dominant at A and B and recessive at C, or is dominant at B and C and recessive at A, or A and C and recessive at B. So in this case, the question is too open. So we are unaware, or we are undecisive, or we are unsure. We are not sure about which particular dominant genes are they talking about. So we're gonna use all of the 3. So in this ratio, we could consider that the the progeny is gonna be dominant at A and B, and in that case, we are gonna use the first ratio 9. Right. So if the person is dominant at the first 2 genes, it's gonna be 9 over 64. What if it's dominant between the first and the third? That is the gene A and the gene C. So we don't know. It could be that if the person is dominant at A and B, or A and C or B and C. So we're gonna have 9 over 64 or 9 over 64 or 9 over 64. And in probability, all means addition. So you're gonna have you're gonna have 9 over 64, 9 over 64 plus 9 over 64 plus 9 over 64. So that will give us 27 over 64. So in the calculation here, we have 9 over 64 plus 9 over 64 plus 9 over 64, which will be 27 over 64. Alright, so to calculate for the probability for one recessive gene only, that is, it means that out of the three genes, we have only one to be recessive. It means the others are dominant. So you go back to the ratio. Now in this ratio, I said earlier that the 27 represents all dominant, three dominant genes, 9 represents two dominant genes, and 3 represents one dominant gene. Right? So in the 3, it means that one dominant gene and how do you call it? So if one is dominant, then 2 will be recessive because the total number of genes is 3. And then the last one represents 0 dominant and 3 recessive. But the question said 1 recessive. So where will 1 recessive be? It will definitely be at the 9. The 9, we said that we have two dominant genes. So if we have two dominant genes, it means we have one recessive gene because the total number of genes is 3. So the 9 is the one expressing one recessive gene. So you use the ratios of the 9. So the same thing, you're gonna be like the previous question. So probability of one recessive gene only is gonna be 9 over 64 plus 9 over 64 plus 9 over 64, which is 7 over 64. Then what about probability of the progeny having all recessive genes? All recessive gene is the last ratio in the genetic ratio, that will be 1. So 1 over 64. Then probability of no recessive gene. No recessive gene means all dominance. So in the ratio, no recessive is at where we have the 3 dominant genes. So if the genes are 3 in total and there's no recessive, it means they are all dominant. And if you have probability of all dominant, we use the 27. So in that question, you're gonna be it's gonna be 27 or 64. Then we calculate the last one, the probability that at least the progeny is gonna have two dominant genes. So you go back to the ratio. Let's go back to the ratio and do some illustration. So at least two dominant genes means two dominant genes and above. Okay, two dominant genes and above. So you're gonna have two dominant genes and you're gonna have three dominant genes. So two dominant genes, the ratios that indicate two dominant genes are 9, 9, 9. So to calculate for the two dominant genes first, you're gonna have 9 over 64 plus 9 over 64 plus 9 over 64. Or, right, it's gonna be or because it's either the person is at the two dominant genes or the three dominant genes. So you're gonna have 9 over 64 plus 9 over 64 plus 9 over 64 or 27 over 64. So the calculation goes this way. So we're gonna have 9 over 64 plus 9 over 64 plus 9 over 64. We represent the two dominant genes, and then 27 over 64 we represent the three dominant genes. So it all we're gonna have a ratio of 54 over 64. So 54 over 64 becomes the answer for at least two dominant genes. Now try this once. Um, I'll look out for your answer in the comment section. The probability for at most two dominant genes and at least one dominant gene. So those two questions, I would like you to deal with the solution and I will look out for your answer in the comment section. So thank you for watching.